Welcome to the Brown County Hour.
Coming to you from the legendary hills of Brown,
where the plum purple haze,
the one nature herself drapes over the hills and hollers,
inspires local characters, artists, and nature lovers.
It's as though the hills themselves conspire to create a beauty and culture in the heart of Indiana.
Sit for a spell and hear the music.
tall tales,
true stories,
and current goings-on.
Brought to you by folks who still know how to sit by a fire in winter
And swim buck naked in summer. Welcome to episode 66 of the Brown County Hour. This is Dave Seastrom.
And Cari Ray, along with the rest of the crew. Our musical guest this month is Steve Plessinger from the Warm Bloods. We'll listen to some of their music and the conversation we had in our studio with Steve.
We have a conversation with Mary George Kip about the upcoming Quilt Show here at the History Center. Cari Ray brings us another For a Song, and we'll hear her conversation with Cara Huddleston about foraging medicinal herbs.
John Boyer shares his This Old Guitar story. Jim Eagleman goes a little cuckoo with his nature segment. And our own Dave Seastrom has a tribute to Doc Brester.
We begin the show by listening to our conversation with Steve Plessinger from the Warm Bloods. Mary George Kip shares some information about the Quilt Show that will take place here at the History Center. And we'll listen to the Warm Bloods perform their song, Eller Road.
It is our privilege to have Steve Plessinger and Mike Stogdill with us this evening, and they are from the Warm Bloods. Hi, guys. I realize this is only part of the band. You want to talk about the members that aren't here? I mean, they can't defend themselves.
Right, yeah. We've got Joel Woodcock on drums and Jason Barker on lead guitar, Andy Hollis on keys, and then the album that we're talking about this evening, Matthew Babineau also played keys on that.
From Dallas, Texas.
What's the name of that album?
It's just self-titled.
The Warm Bloods.
The Warm Bloods EP.
Well, we were just talking about some of your Brown County connections. Steve, you've got family that lives here, and you've lived here and worked here off and on.
Yeah, I most recently worked at the Pine Room, and my parents live here in Brown County. My brother and his family live over here, and I lived here years ago, so I love this county. It's very magical.
Well, and you said that you guys do a lot of gigs here, and that your lead guitar player is also a Brown Countyan.
Yep, he sure is. He lives out in one of the hollers out there, away from town. Yeah, we love playing the Pine Room.
We played the
Big Busted Bar.
Yeah.
There you go.
St.
That was
Patty's.
St. Patty's last year in 2016.
That was a lot of fun. That was a really good show.
Yeah, and actually another neat connection is my wife and I actually got married out at the Bill Monroe Park on the main stage, and we had music out there and our band played, and so that was a really cool connection for my wife and I. And we were all there, and I think half the band was in the groom's party and everything. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun that day.
That sounds pretty romantic. I didn't even know they'd allow you to do that out there.
We were shocked, and they were very accommodating and very very kind. And it was we were blessed. It was like the last Saturday in October, and it was 78 or something outside. It was magical.
Perfect.
It was
Nice.
awesome. Yeah.
So let's talk about your musical roots. Where do you guys draw your inspiration? What backgrounds do you bring to this?
For me, I'd say I'm fairly eclectic until I met Steve. Like, my two favorite bands of all time are Queen and the Beatles.
That's
But
pretty
I love
broad.
I love Pearl Jam, the 90s stuff that I grew up listening to in high school, Stone Temple Pilots, stuff like that. My favorite genre of music is probably Motown if I had to sit down and listen to something for a long period of time.
You could do a lot worse than that.
So older country, like old country.
Yeah,
I'm into,
real
like,
country
anything,
music.
Yeah, real country music.
Yeah.
I can do that. I tell people I'm not a big country fan, but if it's old country music, I can listen to that.
Man, if
know.
you can't enjoy Ernest Tubbs, I mean, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, so I'm a songwriter as well. As long as the lyrics are good, I pretty much like it.
Well, what about you, Steve?
Very similar. I love Zeppelin. I love the Beatles. Also really went through a phase, after high school where I really locked on to certain artists and really explored their catalog, whether it was like Johnny Cash or Bob Dylan or like I love Simon and Garfunkel and John Prine. I think I was really drawn to like singer-songwriters. I was kind of like Mike. I didn't really care for country, but I think that was when we got in the kind of corporate country that we see today that kind of manifested itself in the 90s. That's what I was rebelling against when I went back and listened to old, Merle Haggard or Willie Nelson or Johnny Cash or any of them. I
Patsy
love
Cline.
it. Yeah, Patsy Cline. I mean, that really resonated with me and really kind of that country rock, thing that then happened with the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner and all that. So it all kind of finds a way. But one thing with our band is we have this appreciation for these bands in the past, but trying to take it in a new direction. But to me, there was something about the music that was very earnest back in those days. People were creating art and they were doing it because they loved it. And then the scene blew up around them. And people looked at it from the fan perspective like, oh, I want to be this rock star. They're making millions and everything. But really, it was just this attitude. Now it's more about what kind of image you have or what can you sell nowadays. And it's kind of lost that. And so we try to kind of stick, these guys keep me humble and
There you go.
and I mean it's just we try to just create good music and really try to pay tribute to that, but also try to create something new.
Well, so that's a good point. On this album, these are all original songs?
Yeah.
And you guys are the authors of them?
Yeah, Steve wrote all of them.
Yeah, the album, the way it started and really the way the band started is I had these songs that I'd been working on and I'd been doing a lot of acoustic gigs. I had a monthly stint at the Muddy Boots for a long time. And I really wanted to kind of flesh it out and make it a little more rock, with a few of the tunes. So it was actually Joel, who I had known from years ago, and he said, you ought to give Mike a call, because he has a home studio, and very reasonable and everything. And I called Mike, and we started working together, and we got a few months into recording everything. And I remember sitting there one time at the board, and I was like, hey, Mike, I was like, it's tough to find people that want to play this kind of music and go out and, be serious about it and everything. And I said, it's the hardest part is finding a band. And he was kind of like, well, I'm not doing anything, And I said, really? I mean, because like he said, he's a singer-songwriter in his own right. He, makes his own music. And I was just really kind of floored by that. Just like, wow, you'd want to play in a band with me? And he was like, sure. So kind of went from there.
Yeah, started off on electric guitar. I was the lead guitar player and then switched over to bass when we found Jason because Jason is way better than I am. So
Yeah.
it was an easy
Yeah.
transition.
Well, there you go.
And Joel, who we mentioned, he had been living in Nashville, Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
And
The other Nashville.
The other Nashville.
The other Nashville.
Him and his wife decided to move back to Bloomington to start a family. And so he was interested when he heard what we were doing. And so he jumped on as a drummer. This original EP has a different drummer, a good friend by the name of Buddy Mitchell, who Mike's worked with a lot in the past and does an excellent job on there. And he's involved with a lot of projects with people around Bloomington. And
They just recorded down here last week, 2 weeks ago.
Jen Christie.
Yeah. He's the drummer for Jen Christie, and they recorded a live album down here at the Playhouse, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We were really blessed to have him on there, and then Matthew, who we mentioned, a student at IU. I think he was like a sophomore, maybe when we met him, and just blew us away. I mean, you take Stevie Wonder and McCoy Tyner and other greats on piano and put them together. I mean, he
can do anything.
He can do anything on keys,
and he's actually a saxophone player, so it is kind of annoying that he's so good on that.
Do you ever let him play his sax in your band?
We've jammed a few times, but we've never really recorded it. The music is more rock, but we've had some moments where we've
some saxophone.
It would be cool. We're not I would love to put horns on some stuff, but we just haven't quite found the right song yet. But if we do, he can go to town.
And Matthew's been busy. He's like in his senior year, and he's finishing up. He's actually finishing up his summer session, and he's moving back home in Texas. So we're just trying to enjoy the time we have with him now. And we know he's bound for bigger and better things.
Bound for glory.
Yeah, but we were actually working on a new album and that we're almost finished with, and he's all over it too. So we're just happy that this moment in time has been captured where we've got Matthew on there because he's very talented.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, and we're going to have the new album coming very soon. We're hoping to have an album release in September, and we're very excited about it. But the new album is actually all the band members, and it's really this collaborative spirit where every time a new track's laid, I'm just amazed at what kind of new direction the song goes, and it really, I think, showcases everybody.
So do you guys have a website or a Facebook page?
Facebook, yeah, we're on there, the Warm Bloods. We're working on a website now. We've also got an Instagram and a Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your music with us. I know we're going to love it.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, thank you.
It's our privilege to have Mary George Kip with us this afternoon, and she's going to be talking about the Quilt Show here at the History Center. Hi, good to see you.
Well, it's good to be here to publish our quilt show and get everybody enthusiastic about it.
Well, tell us about this event. How many years has it been going on?
The first quilt show was 39 years ago, and we've had 38 quilt shows. The quilt show was originally started by the female members of the Historical Society 39 years ago because they needed to raise money. And they decided they would have a quilt show.
Well, I would think there's a long history of quilts in Brown County.
There is a very long history.
Well, as you see, we have a small collection of quilts here in our studio that we're quite proud of, and we use them for acoustics, but also for the beauty of them, and I think that's the attraction that a lot of people have to quilts.
Well, people who make quilts, many times there's a reason why they make the quilt. It's a gift for someone, or they put memories in it, like material from dresses or shirts that their family members have worn. So it's quite a personal thing when you're making a quilt.
Is this a fundraising event for the History Center?
This is a big fundraising for the History Center. We have a raffle quilt that we spend a whole year hand quilting.
Is this a group effort?
This is a group effort. We have a gift shop where people in the Pioneer Women have made various items to sell. They also donate material and other sewing items to sell. We have a cafe where people can come and have lunch or a cup of coffee and just sit down. If the men want to come with their wives, they have a place they can come and sit. It will cost $5 to get in.
Okay.
And they can use that ticket for 3 days. Because some people come in and would like to come back the next day to see more.
Well, you've raised an interesting question. Are there any men that are involved in making quilts?
So far, we haven't had any men enter a quilt here, but there are men who make absolutely beautiful and wonderful quilts in the United States.
Well, I'm sure somewhere there has to be.
Oh, yes.
I'm told that traditional weavers were often men.
Yes, they used to come around in their wagons because actually there wasn't enough room in a cabin to have a big loom, and so the weavers would come around in their wagons and they would set up in one of the larger homes and they would weave the yarn that has been spun throughout the winter. So the men were the moving weavers.
The moving weavers. I love that. Tell us the dates and the times for this event.
Okay, this event is going to take place in September, the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The hours on Friday and Saturday are from 10 to 5, and on Sunday it's from 10 to 3.
Will there be quilting demonstrations?
There will be demonstrations of hand quilting. We'll have spinners there with their spinning wheels. We'll have people doing maybe knitting, crocheting, embroidery work, rug hooking. But there will also be on all day Saturday, there will be little 1-hour sessions of teaching and giving tips on quilting.
I see. Mary, is there different categories of quilts, and would you describe some of them?
They have categories that go from hand quilting to machine quilting and group quilts, individual quilts, Many people choose not to have their quilts judged, but they choose to just display their work. So you can come and see all different kinds of quilts that people have dreamed up over the year.
Is this open to anyone?
This is open to anyone that would like to
bring in a quilt and participate in the event. Excellent. So the website for the History Center is browncountyhistorycenter.org, and I assume you could register for this event there and get more information. Well, Mary George, are you yourself a quilter?
I am a quilter, but I didn't start quilting till we retired and moved here in '99. I was given a box of blocks by my mother-in-law, and I said, I need to learn how to do this. And I was told to go to the Pioneer Women, and that's how I became involved with the Pioneer Women. And my husband and I became very interested in the Historical Society. So we've been members since 2000.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing this information with us. We look forward to the show.
You're welcome.
And I took my lance, went out looking to rumble. When I saw her eyes, I dropped my guys, cause I knew I'd have to be humble. There were summer rides and lovely eves, rustling around in the autumn leaves, all the hope that I could ever know. Down on Ella Road, yeah, found myself a little pot of gold. Down at the end of the monochrome rainbow, yeah, oh, swirling round in circles round my soul. Oh, oh. 2 later years realize our fears that the world's about to crumble. All the eyes in eastern skies, he made it won't be humble. Man with the vision, man with the charm, got a little sweet baby on each arm. Goes to bed at night and cries alone. Down on Ella Road, yeah, found myself a little pot of gold. Down at the end of the monochrome rainbow, yeah, oh, swirling round in circles round my soul. Oh, oh. Gotta hitch the plow to the back of the horse. Keep moving on to the next one. Down the Ella Road, yeah, found myself a little pot of gold. Down at the end of the monochrome rainbow, yeah, oh, swirling round in circles round my soul. Found myself a little pot of gold. Down at the end of the monochrome rainbow, yeah, oh, swirling round in circles round my soul. Oh, oh. Yeah, no, no, yeah. Whoa,
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 at Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
In this portion of the show, Jim Eagleman shares his nature segment. John Boyer tells us about his old Stella Guitar. Cari Ray has another for a song, and we'll hear the Warm Bloods tune, Puget Sound.
Yeah, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she sings as she flies. And the cuckoo sings a pretty song on the 4th day of July. Hello, this is Jim Eagleman reporting again for another segment of Nature News, WFHB FM Radio, the Brown County Hour. That traditional song, that folk song, has been recorded by many singers, including Donovan and Bob Dylan, Doc Watson, and Mother Maybelle Carter. That should give us a hint of the bird's range, its commonness, and the fact that it's made enough of an impression that people want to sing about it. The cuckoo's in the same family as the western funny bird, the roadrunner. Have you seen cartoons of that bird? It has a curved bill, and it's usually yellow, but it's only yellow on the lower part of the bill, the lower mandible. It's also called by many the rain crow. It's the yellow-billed cuckoo that we hear now in Brown County. That usual clucking noise may be what some folks think is an excited squirrel barking somewhere, but it is the song, if that's a good description of it, of this neotropical bird. This kyow, kyow, kyow song, or clucking that slows down as you listen, is a call that announces its presence. Look up where the call comes from, and a mass of webbing like a thick spider web can usually be seen. This is where the forest tent caterpillars live, and they continue to defoliate the clumps of leaves as the adults caterpillars crawl through and around the web. You'll see this massive webbing on domestic fruit trees particularly, but also on native trees like pignut hickory and black cherry in our Brown County woods. The cuckoo is so likely to feed on these tent caterpillars that they are often depicted in bird field guides with the caterpillars and the webbing in the background. They also feed on cicadas when the buzzing continues into late August afternoons. It's been found that when prey abundance of cicadas and tent caterpillars increase, that this can lead to a production of excess eggs and eventually to brood parasitism. This is one of the checks on cuckoo populations. High numbers increase chances of the young attacked by both internal and external parasites. Like mange and furbears, overcrowding and high numbers can accelerate the diebacks. The distinct black and white checkerboard marking on the underside of the tail is a good field mark. It's usually visible as the bird flits about. So is the telltale yellow bill, although not as easily seen. Like any bird watching, a good pair of optics will increase the pleasure of seeing birds. Seeing this bird is not difficult. Listen for the clucking and following it to the tree branch where the males usually call and the female is close by. The nest is similar to the mourning dove that we talked about last time. It's an unkept mass of twigs lined with rootlets and leaves rimmed with pine needles. That may be why the cuckoo in our backyard lately is perched in a lone pine tree. A second brood attempt may happen. In addition to caterpillars, the birds also feed on frogs, lizards, fruits, and berries. The eggs are light blue in color, usually 4 in the nest, and the young are attended to by both parents. Young when born are atricial, meaning featherless and blind. Egg to fledgling time is short. The young can climb about branches in maybe about a week and fly at about 3 weeks. This bird is a neotropic migrant, and it winters in South America, in Peru, Bolivia, and Argentina. What a trip it is to get here to Brown County. Over time, unfortunately, like many other songbirds, populations worldwide have declined despite good egg production periodically. Now, through this usually hot and humid days of August here in Brown County, you may be happy with all the mild and cool weather. These changes in usual weather patterns cause many birds and animals to react accordingly. Like us, we move about and are more active when it isn't so hot. Same is true of many species of Indiana wildlife, making it a great time to enjoy your time afield. Perhaps overlooked and underappreciated, look for the yellow-billed cuckoo in your woods in the next few days. The tent caterpillars will be your first clue that the bird is there. Thanks for listening. Jim Eagleman, Nature News, WFHB, the Brown County Hour.
Welcome to This Old Guitar, where we learn about the instruments that inspire local musicians and the stories behind them.
This is John Boyer with This Old Guitar Story. Several years ago, at a family reunion, I was given what used to be a guitar by one of my relatives. There really wasn't much left of it, hardly. I mean, it was like it was crushed. The top was cracked. The bridge was off of it. The
sides were
there
off
was
of
no
it.
playing it. Their strings were gone. Sides were blown out. Braces were loose. I mean, it was just like somebody just beat the guitar on the ground, but that's not what happened. It's just really old and dusty and dirty. Really what had happened was it had been left in the attic for a really long time. So she gave me this guitar, and she's like, hey, can you clean this up somehow? It doesn't have to be playable. Is there anything we can do? It was her dad's, which was my Uncle Harold. And I loved Uncle Harold. So I was like, yeah, of course. I'll see if there's something I can do. I don't think I'll ever make it playable again. But I took it, and I had it for, 10 years anyway. It'd sit on the fire mantle, and I moved a few times, and it was around. And then I met my girlfriend, Jayme Hood, here. And she happens to know a guy named Daniel Kearns that lives up in Kokomo. Somehow or another, she was going up there to pick up a fiddle or something that he'd redone. At the last minute, I'd thought about my Uncle Harold's guitar, and I was like, take this with you, handed it to her. And so off Uncle Harold's guitar went.
I took it to Dan's.
You took it to Dan's.
And we took it out of this case, and it looked horrible. And I was kind of apologetic, like, hey, man, this is sort of an impossible task. Like, if you can't do it, it's okay. We just sort of want it to be a wall hanger, no pressure. And he immediately got a sponge and started just, squirting water all over it. And he got out some sort of solvent, and he's trying to clean this and that, and just immediately went to work. I left it with him, and flash forward about 6 weeks or something, and we get a call from Dan.
Yeah, we get a call from Dan. So we go up there, and we didn't really know what had happened, really. So we show up at his house, and here he hands me this guitar. And it's a 1920s Stella guitar. And a lot of Stellas were sold in Sears and Roebuck's catalogs and stuff like that. But this one was a really nice one, or had been. But now it was nice again. I mean, it was unbelievable how he got all that put back together somehow. And he even told this horrible story about how he took this battery drill with strings attached to the braces on the inside, and he had to hit this battery drill at the just right time, and it sucked in the sides and collapsed in the back and got all that to snap together.
And we were just horrified, oh my gosh, what did you do to this thing? But wow, look at it. It looks like a guitar, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was a beautiful guitar.
So it's gone on to have a pretty interesting life.
And here's the other thing is I had no idea my Uncle Harold even played guitar. And he had passed when I got this guitar. He'd already gone on. And I had no idea. He was one of my favorite uncles. And that never came up. And it turns out that one time their house burnt, and that guitar was one of the few things that actually was saved out of that house fire. So it was even a miracle that guitar was even around at all. And then it ended up in this horrible dilapidated state, and now here it was again. Now, if you recall, my relative had given me this guitar, and she, and I told her I'd give it back. So I hung out with it. I played it for a while, and it played amazing. Beautiful guitar. And our first album, there's a lot of that guitar on it. I used it to record a record with.
And Reverend Peyton did a front porch session song on it and featured that guitar.
That's true. And then I kept my word, and I took it back and gave it to my uncle's daughter, and they have it to this day. That's the way it should have been. That's the way it was supposed to go. And everybody's like, why didn't you keep that guitar? And I'm sometimes I don't know. I should have kept the guitar, But, that's what they wanted to do with it. They were a family, and I love them, and I'm glad it went back to their side of the family, and they have it. It's great.
That's our old guitar story, I guess.
That's our old guitar story. Yeah, my Uncle Harold's guitar, his old Stella.
eyes. I found my heart on my sleeve. Bittersweet words that tumble through my mind. God grant me my reprieve. Careless woman, she done me wrong. She turned my tender love away.
I'm Cari Ray with another installment of For a Song. If you are a creative, whatever that means, then your creativity has likely expressed itself in multiple ways over the years. I know mine has. These days, professionally speaking, I'm a singer-songwriter. Before that, professionally speaking, I was a creative director and an art director before that. Even now, strictly unprofessionally, I play around with leatherwork, do some wood carving via hatchet and Sloyd knife, dabble in photography, write poetry, prose, and, obviously, essays about the creative process. I even do a small bit of graphic design for our little shop. Speaking of art, there's a dance around artistic expression that I've always been intrigued by. It's the scale that extends from the symbolic to the literal and back again. Allow me to expand on that. Think about visual art for a moment. Imagine the realistic nature of Renaissance masters like Michelangelo or Raphael. Now think of the symbolism of artists like Kahlo or Dali. And finally of abstract artists like Mondrian or Pollock. From every detail accounted for to the near absence of any familiar or nameable form. As a fine art major in college, one of my required classes my freshman year was drawing. A fledgling graphic designer, I showed up my first day of Figure Study 101 with my beloved mechanical pencils. Anyhow, my professor knitted his brow over his half glasses and asked me what in the hell I was thinking bringing those to his class. Before I could answer, I had been directed, unceremoniously I might add, to march downstairs to the college bookstore and purchase a piece of natural charcoal and a 12-inch wooden ruler. Upon my return, both were snatched from me. The stick of charcoal was strapped to the end of the ruler with a length of artist tape, and I was informed that for the first 2 weeks of class, this was to be my only artistic instrument. If I was ever going to learn to make art, much loosening up was required, and he was going to see to it. So I scrawled, scowled and scrawled. And I stopped drawing things at some point and began instead to draw line, shape, light, and shadow, until the expression became more important than the precision. In songwriting, I often ask myself if I want to make broad strokes. And sometimes that decision comes down to audience participation, the kind where I leave more to imagination and interpretation. I first became enlightened about the importance of this distinction a few years back. I was in Texas on a self-led and imposed writing retreat and had emerged after a few days to spend the evening with friends. I pulled out the guitar to share one of the songs I had just written. One friend remarked that she liked the imagery of a particular line, and so I began to tell her what it was about. I got about 2/3 of the way through, and she said, "Stop, don't tell me anymore. I want to hold on to my own experience of the song and what it means to me." That exchange crystallized for me the idea that I write these songs but have little influence over how they are heard or interpreted by the listener. And that maybe offering that listener broad strokes leaves them plenty of room to make it their own. Through the filter of their own experience, to almost become an accessory after the fact. To create musical mad libs that folks can fill in with their own brand of madness. To do so takes a little discipline, to leave the openings, and it takes a willingness to trust the people and the process. And not only must you abstain from expectations of any kind about the outcome, you must exchange the need to be heard for the need to experience and foster connection. So the point, precise or blunt, is expression. And there is no wrong way. That said, I often challenge myself, and am challenging you, to try broad strokes. Make your marks from the shoulder if you can, from the elbow if you can't, but for the love, never from the wrist. Then prepare yourself to experience yourself in new ways. I'm Cari Ray, wishing you Godspeed and hoping you'll join me next time on For a Song. If you have ideas, questions, or topics you would like to have covered on For a Song, please send them along. You can reach me via the contact page of my website, cariray.com. That's CARIRAY.com. Thanks for listening.
Send my regards to the old man. Tell him I tried to make him proud. Take my old Bible to my mother. Tell her of a peace that I have found. Tell her of a peace that I have found. Carry my rifle to my brother. Tell him I hope it serves him well. Gonna find my fortune by the water. Gonna fish the waters of the Puget Sound. Gonna fish the waters of the Puget Sound. Yeah. Take my empty flask to my uncle. Fill it full and pass it around. Tell them all of the fabled water. The early morning fog of the Puget Sound. The early morning fog of the Puget Sound. Give this old guitar to my woman. Tell her of a new home I found. My soul still belongs to that woman, but my body lies at the bottom of the Puget Sound. My body lies at the bottom of the Puget Sound. Oh.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 in Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
We begin the final segment of the show with Cari Ray's conversation with Cara Huddleston about holistic foraging. Dave Seastrom shares a tribute to Doc Brester, and we'll close with the Warm Blood song, Always Be Mine.
Hey there, this is Cari Ray with the Brown County Hour, and I'm sitting here with Cara Huddleston, a good friend of mine, and someone who I happen to know knows quite a bit about wild medicinals. I know it feels like every time I run into you, especially over hiking, I won't say where, I don't want to give away your spots, but it's somewhere, maybe I'm fishing and you show up and there you are, quote unquote, hiking, and I'm like, oh wait, it's Cara, she's not hiking, she's foraging for something, I'm sure, while she hikes. And oftentimes you have handfuls of green things, and of course you always have something interesting to tell me about what that's for. So tell us a little.
Last time I saw you were looking for nettles.
You were looking for nettles. So
yes.
Let's come back to the nettles in a minute, but before we do that, before we get to our stomping around Brown County stories, if you would tell folks a little bit about your background, kind of what brought you here to kind of this slightly more wild existence.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing massage therapy for the last 13 years, and then in a short story, I was married at the time and my husband developed cancer, so I got into massage therapy and started looking at more integrative, holistic practices. Then that kind of led me down the journey, and after he passed, I saw the quality of life that integrative medicine did for him along with the science-based medicine, and so it kind of became my life passion, and I traveled and went to Belize and studied tropical agroforestry. And then my upbringing, of course, is in Seymour, Indiana, where I learned temperate climate farming. Both my grandparents were farmers.
Tell us a little bit about, you worked for a while with an integrative doctor, and explain kind of what that means.
Well, an integrative doctor, actually, we're really blessed in Indiana because he's actually in Seymour, where I grew up. And so he studied Western medicine and believes in the science of Western medicine, but he also studied Eastern medicine as well. So he looks at the holistic person. So emotional aspects of disease, the food aspect of disease, supplements. Obviously, we should be getting all these nutrients in our diet, but with our fast-paced lives, we don't. So he looks at the holistic person and sees maybe what they're not getting in their diet. Maybe they're getting headaches, but they're not getting enough magnesium, so they need to eat more greens. But if you can't eat more greens, spinach, kale, those kinds of things, then maybe you need to take a supplement.
It sounds like this is a doctor and where you learn to treat the person, the whole person, not the disease.
Right. Yeah. Right. And then bringing science into it. It's just kind of balancing it out. So that's what he does. And he brought me in as a massage therapist. So I work through the hospital to do massage therapy on different patients.
Which I'm assuming would be part of his treatment at times.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yes, a lot of times, people were getting headaches or migraines or back pain. I would work on them, or he would recommend. Obviously massage has so many great benefits as far as detoxing the body, reducing stress levels.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get back to our nettles. Yeah. So last time I saw you had a fistful of nettles, and I happen to know that you eat them, which actually I sampled some in some chicken marsala that you made at a pitch-in. A little spinachy, but we're not talking about the edible nature of them. You had them for another reason, so tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I love nettles. They have so many medicinal benefits. They're higher in magnesium, vitamin D than spinach, actually. So when you actually cook them, the stinging part of the nettle comes off. But you can also dry them for tea. They're anti-inflammatory. They're all over Brown County, and they're easy to identify. Some people might get them confused for
horse nettles.
Horse nettles, but they're still nettles and they still have a lot of the same properties. So depending on the soil and light, obviously when you pick them, you want to pick them in an area that is not polluted and that is in an area where it's very, very pristine. But they're all, Brown County is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and it's covered with nettles. So
Sure. Sure.
Definitely recommend
Yeah.
collecting
So
them.
what are some other things that you regularly forage to have available for? Maybe they're medicinal purposes. Maybe that's too strong of a word. Or also just for their supplement qualities.
Well, I mean, basically, your whole yard can be a snack.
Let's break that down, if you would. I know you eat dandelion greens, but
yeah, I mean, dandelions are great. I mean, dandelions are actually, very detoxifying to the liver. I mean,
now are we talking about the flower, like the head of the flower, or the greens?
Well, you can eat the whole dandelion, but the greens are really, really good. They're very bitter. But if you cook them in some coconut oil, whatever kind of spice you like, if you want to spice it up with some turmeric, then you got a whole anti-inflammatory dish and it tastes good and you got some salt and pepper. Food is medicine.
Yeah, so I was going to say this sounds like prescriptive eating. It's prescriptive eating.
So they are very good. And then, you have plantain, which tastes very close to kale. And if you go to the store, I mean, kale's rather expensive, so you can just go in your front yard and pick some plantain and whatever kind of oil you want. I preferably like coconut oil because it can be heated on high heat. You can cook that up with salt and pepper and you got all your vitamin B complex right in your front yard.
Wow. Is there anything else we're missing and stepping?
Clover.
Okay, clover.
I mean,
right?
You just want to make sure, if you're spraying your yard, which a lot of folks do, you do not want to be eating your front yard. That's not good. No, but you obviously, if you live in the country, if you're not spraying, I mean, there's there's all kinds of edibles that you can eat.
I remember as a kid walking around and finding little clover flowers, and it was like much ado about nothing, but you could pull out the little petals, I guess it is, of the clover, and it's a little sweet. You get that nectar off the flower. I did that with honeysuckle too.
Yeah, we were eating clover the other day on the. Remember up on the dam on Yellowwood?
Oh,
yeah, we were picking clover.
Yeah. And then there's onions. A lot of people have wild onions and wild ginger in Brown County. That's all around.
Ramps and mullein.
Yeah, ramps and mullein is great for the lungs. I mean, mullein is awesome. I mean, you have to dry it, and the natives used to smoke it, and if there's any phlegm or anything in your lungs, it'll clear your lungs out. So it's good for folks that are trying to quit smoking.
Wow. Forget the Nicorette.
Right? Yeah, get the mullein. It's in your backyard.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, and I have a feeling that we could probably go on for another, at a minimum, half hour talking about probably just the things in our yard that we can eat and use. But I think this gives people a little bit of an idea, which is kind of the wonder of all that is around us that's there for us that we don't even realize. I think that's what has always fascinated me about the conversations we've had and what I wanted you to be able to share. Thank you so much, Cara, for being here and having the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I'm writing this on the day of the eclipse, and somehow it seems appropriate. Brown County folks and people from the surrounding area are saying goodbye to an era, and because of that, we're experiencing a monumental transition. I'm talking about someone who's touched the lives of thousands of our animal friends and the humans who care about them. This can only be one person, Dr. James E. Brester. Doc Brester has recently announced that he is retiring from his veterinary practice in Bean Blossom after almost 50 years of service to the community. I've had the pleasure of knowing Doc Brester for over 40 of those years, but more importantly, so have our furry family members. His kind and gentle way of interacting with them always put our friends at ease. He saved our dogs from rattlesnake bites, infections, and numerous illnesses. He stitched wounds, set broken bones, and offered comfort when they were suffering. He's administered shots and salves and potions, much to the benefit of all who received them. Doc didn't confine his practice to just small animals, and large farm animals also received the benefit of his wisdom and experience. One of the first times I met Doc, he came out to our place on 3-Story Hill to stitch up one of our horses. Jenny, an American quarter horse, was spooked by something and got herself tangled in a barbed wire fence. Her right leg was ripped open and the wound was severe enough that her muscle tissue was exposed. I asked a neighbor what we should do, and there was only one answer. Call Doc Brester. He'll know what to do. Doc showed up early the next morning, and while I held Jenny, he washed the wound and applied so many stitches she looked like a sewing machine had run down her leg. He gave her a few shots, handed me a brown paper envelope full of pills, and told me to call him if she had any problems. He said he would be back in about 10 days to remove the stitches, and as I recall, he charged me $40. This would have been in the summer of 1977. Jenny healed perfectly and hardly had any scars at all. A few years later, a neighbor called as he was on his way home from the night shift to tell us that our dog Dexter had been hit by a car at Fruitdale, and it looked like he was dead. I rushed up there and found him severely wounded with multiple fractures and a long, deep cut at the top of his head. I knew that if he was to have any chance at all, he needed immediate medical attention. I carefully placed him on a blanket, carried him to the car, and drove straight over to Doc Brester's house. It was about 4 a.m. when I knocked on his door. A rather groggy Doc Brester answered the door in his pajama bottoms, and as he stood there scratching himself, he said, "I've got to sleep sometime, you know." I apologized, and I told him what was going on, and he told me he would meet me at the clinic in a few minutes. He looked Dexter over and gave him a sedative and told me he would perform the necessary surgery that morning. Poor Dexter had multiple injuries, and he required a steel pin in his leg, his hip was wired back together, and he received so many stitches I lost count. After a long recovery, he lived for many years and remarkably adapted to his subsequent handicaps. His hind end was almost useless to him, and to climb a set of stairs, he would do a tip-up and walk up the stairs on his 2 front legs. In spite of this, he could run almost as fast as the other dogs. I don't recall how much all of this cost, but including his stay at the clinic, it was well under $100. I mention how much he charged because his mission was to provide medical care to any animal that needed it, and to accomplish this, he was notorious for undercharging. Every weekday and Saturday, his parking lot was always filled with people and their animals waiting for their turn. He worked on a first-come, first-served basis, and he would stay at the clinic until everyone was seen. Some of the locals learned that you could go in when they opened up in the morning and sign in, which guaranteed you would be seen in the early afternoon. Before the state changed the rules, you could purchase the medicine your animal needed and administer it yourself. The gal behind the desk would fix you up with the syringes full of vaccine or packets of pills with instructions written on them. That changed some time ago. One morning, I was there to pick up some medicine, and Doc Brester was in the back of a Stateside truck full of male hogs. While I waited to speak with him, he was busy castrating one pig after another. On top of the cab was a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Every once in a while, his hand would reach up, grab the sandwich, and he would take another bite before returning to his work. I'm glad that Doc was able to sell his practice and begin his much-deserved retirement. According to the paper, he's retained the right to mow the grass at the clinic. The new folks will undoubtedly make changes, but it's good to know that Doc Brester will still be around if he's needed. It's impossible to express the degree of gratitude that many thousands of us feel for his many years of service. So I'll simply close with, thank you, Doc. It was a privilege to know you, and all of us wish you a wonderful retirement. You have earned it. This is Dave Seastrom. See you next time.
Side of you, your little curves, your other worlds are gazing amazement from your door. I would buy you
Thanks for tuning in to episode 66 of the Brown County Hour, recorded in our studio at the History Center here in downtown Nashville and brought to you the first Sunday of every month at 9 a.m. and at our new time the following Wednesday at 5:30 p.m.
The Brown County Hour is brought to you by a diverse group of folks who believe, now more than ever, that the world is for everyone.
This show was produced by
Chuck Wills,
Pam Rader,
Rick Fettig,
Vera Grubbs,
Carrie Ray,
and Dave Seastrom. We would also like to thank Slats Klug for our theme music. You have been listening to the Brown County Hour,
coming to you from deep in the woods of Brown County, Indiana.
celebrating the arts, culture, and nature that make this such a unique community.
Visit us online at browncountyhour.com.
The Brown County Hour is a production of WFHB.
Volunteer-powered, listener-supported community radio for South Central Indiana.
Take me back to my old Brown County home.